Okay, so Shabbat Shalom for all those that are here, for those that are online, and for those who will be watching later. This week's Parsha is going to be Lech Lecha, and we are going to go to Genesis chapter 12. And it starts in verse 1 and goes through chapter 17, verse 27. The Haftorah portions in Isaiah 40. But we're not really going into that this much. So in this parsha, this focus is on Yah choosing really one family. And it begins with the call of Avram, and it goes in discussing famine in the land, them going to Egypt, Avram and Lot choosing the land that they want, a war with the kings, an encounter with Melchizedek, the covenant made with Abraham, the birth of Ishmael, and then the sending away of Ishmael. So it holds a lot of information. So again, like a lot of times we have to try to narrow down and focus and see what, where Yah is leading us this year and what to discuss. So let's go to Genesis chapter 12, verse 1. And I'm going to spend a little time here. Genesis 12, verse 1. Now Yah said to Abram, get yourself out of your country, away from your kinsmen, and away from your father's house. Go to the land that I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you are to be a blessing. So it starts with that phrase, get yourself out, okay, or Lech Lecha. And Lech Lecha literally means like go for yourself. Okay, Lecha is for for you. Okay, for yourself. So it's implying that you're going to go for your own benefit, or for your own good. But when you look at Lech Lecha written in Hebrew, it is only written with two letters. Okay, it's written with a lamed and a kaf. Okay, and Lech is written lamed kaf. Lecha is written lamed kaf. So the lamed is actually the tallest letter in the Hebrew alphabet. And what's interesting is like the lamed, it means to learn. Okay, lamed means to learn. And so in Israel, it was really interesting because you be walking down the street, or you see cars driving by, and of course you see cars that have the taxi on the top. But you would also see a car sometimes with this blue and white sign on the top of the car, and it had the Hebrew letter lamed, and that lets everybody know, guess what? This is a person who's learning how to drive. Usually. Yeah, usually a teenager, but a lot of times, it's people from other countries or whatever. So if you saw a car with a lamed on it, you really wanted to take notice and be a little careful when you're driving around them. But it let everybody know that this was, someone who's learning to drive. But that letter lamed, is the tallest of all the letters. And then we have the letter kaf that is written sort of like a C. It's bent, but the way it's written in the final form, it's a little different. But kaf is bent, and so when it's like I said, when it's written in the final form, when it's at the end of a word, it's written with a descends below the line. So in this word lek, I was looking at it and I was like, this is teaching us a lesson. We are to learn to bend. It's about, well, what do we do when we're bending? We're bowing down, we're submitting, and it's about submitting to Yah and his will. And to me, looking at that final kaf there, and it's a picture about descending below the line. That is a picture of, are we willing to bend enough to where we're willing to die? To, like, because when you die, you're going into the earth, and lay down your life. Are you willing to submit yourself to him and lay down your life even unto death? And that's what I was getting at looking at that word lek. And numerically, when you look at that word lek, the lamed is 30, and then the kaf is 20. So numerically, it's 50. Okay. And we know that 50 is linked with going beyond this natural world, because it's also, linked with, you think about, okay, well, what happened on the 50th day after Passover?
You have the outpouring spirit.
Yes. And what else happened there? They were given the Torah. Yeah. So it was, and where was it coming from? It was coming from Yah himself. So it was beyond this world. So it's going beyond that. It's when they when the people of Israel took on a new level, when they received the Torah, that, they're going beyond this spiritual existence. And so, to me, I'm looking at it that Yah is emphasizing to Avram that you need to go beyond just what you're seeing in the natural here. You're going to go beyond this into a new level of existence. You're going beyond these ordinary laws that are of nature that are around here. And he's challenging Avram to trust him and believe him. And, to me, it's a challenge to us, because we're going on this journey, and it's a journey. It's not like, just because you say, a prayer or whatever, then everything is all right and everything's changed. No, it is a journey in your walk with Yah. And, think about 250 is linked with Yovel, the year of Jubilee.
Okay, I got a question.
Go ahead.
You said the Hebrew word for let
Lech.
is lamed.
Yes.
And what?
The final cough.
And that's in English, that's let.
Lech.
Oh, lech. Okay.
Lech. Yes,
Oh,
lech.
okay.
Like go for
All right.
yourself, not let.
All right. Okay. All
Lech
right. I'm
Lecha.
good.
Yeah. Like you're going for yourself. And so, yeah. Not let.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So when we think about this 50, it's also linked with Yovel. And so Yovel is the year of Jubilee. What happens in the year of Jubilee?
Everything is restored.
Everything's restored.
Forgiven.
That's a forgiven. What did you say, Ken? Something?
I was agreeing with some
Yeah.
of it.
Mm-hmm. The captives are released. Yeah. Inheritance, land is restored. Your inheritance is restored. So no one is a slave anymore. Yep. So when you look at this, all of this is tied with this 50. So Lech Lecha is more than just go for yourself.
I'm reminding Sandra of that.
It's a test, because we're going to be faced with a difficulty, on that. When we're tested, you're not tested and things are wonderful. You're tested through trials and difficulty. And it's like, when we're tested with those, we have a choice. Are we going to stand rigid, or are we going to bend? And a lot of times, if we approach difficulties in life with flexibility, sort of allowing ourselves to lean in when things don't go as we planned, or we hoped, it can be liberating and sustaining when we lean into it. But a lot of times we don't do that. I'm bad about that. I like things to be in order and done in order. And when things don't, and I plan things out, when things don't go as I planned, it is very stressful for me. And so part of it is me trying to learn, when things aren't going the way I planned it, to lean more into it. And this made me think about, in Florida, the palm trees. A lot of times you think about those big tall palm trees, and what happens when a hurricane comes? So they bend and sway in it, but a lot of times they, some of them will withstand the hurricane winds. Why? Because they're bending. And when you think about even what is that? What is the building?
So I'm a history
Pisa?
expert, maybe.
Uh-huh. Go ahead.
The Eiffel Tower?
The palm tree, when Carolina was fighting the forces, they built forces out of palm trees. And I'm sorry about my phone going off.
Yeah, what? They built
80
fortresses out.
Fortresses.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
fortresses out of palm trees.
Did y'all hear that?
I did not know that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Terry
in
said he did.
Carolina, in the history of South Carolina,
Hmm.
they were facing issues with the enemy, and they built fortresses out of palm trees.
I wonder if that's why the palmetto tree is on
Yes.
the flag. It's
That's
because that's
exactly why that's exactly
okay.
why it's on there.
Well,
Okay.
see, I don't know South Carolina history.
So I guess I am a history expert.
The reason that they did that,
Uh-huh.
I don't know if Kenny's fixing to tell you that,
No, he stopped. Go ahead.
this palm trees absorbed
Hmm.
the British or foreigners who absorbed the cannonballs,
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So,
and that was an attribute that helped them not fall.
right. And you know what a palm tree is in Hebrew?
No.
Tamar. Tamar.
Tamar.
Tamar. That's a palm.
No.
Like the place, the city's name Tamar.
Okay.
Tamar, the palms are Tamar. That's what
And
have you ever been to Tamar? Okay, so then that's it. No. Well, in biblical Tamar, that's where they actually built a whole replica of the tabernacle in the wilderness. You can go visit.
Yep.
Yeah. So okay, but that's what it made me think about was being able to bend in those, in that. And so that's something, that's how they are sustained, is their ability to sway and bend. And this made me think of Matthew chapter 24 and verse 30 or 13, that says that whosoever holds out to the end will be delivered. And that's what it made me think. Matthew 24:13.
what does that say to me?
That you're going to withstand trials. You're going to withstand difficulties and tribulation.
You don't hold out much to.
Good question.
You die early.
Yeah. And part of that, I think is about how do you stand? You have to stand on his word. You have to stand on his faith. On the faith that we have. You have to stand believing what he said. And like I said, Lech Lecha is actually those two letters repeated twice. So why is it repeated? Because anytime we see, something, even though they're pronounced different, and that's something, in Hebrew, sometimes you will see words that are pronounced differently. And they come from different, okay, wait a minute. How about I say this? Sometimes you see words in Hebrew that are pronounced the same, but they are written differently from two different roots. Okay. For example, like in English, we have homonyms, words that sound the same, but they have different meanings, and that's the same thing. They come from different roots. So sometimes I know people will look at a word in Hebrew and they'll, say, oh, well, this sounds exactly like this other Hebrew word, and they'll think that they're linked together. But when you look at their roots, they are not connected. And so just because they're pronounced the same way doesn't mean that they actually have the same root. And the reason I say that is because a lot of times, like, you have an ayin, and an ayin really doesn't have a sound. It doesn't make a sound. And an aleph doesn't make a sound. But you can have two words that are both written with those two letters, like ra'ah. Okay. Ra'ah or ro'eh or ro'ah for shepherd. And you can have that. And also talking about, evil. One's written with an ayin and one's written with an aleph. They are totally different. They're not connected, even though we pronounce them the same because they have the same Nicodote vowel pointing. So I know that's a grammar thing, but that's just something I thought about. Okay, so Lech Lecha is two letters that are repeated. So we've got 50 and 50, which again, I see this as a journey because we are continually to be in a journey of learning to bow and submit. And then I thought about too, well, what's the connection with this 50? Now that if it's repeated here, we've got 100. And we look and see what happens in this parsha. And I want to go over to chapter 17, Genesis chapter 17 and verse 17. And remember, here we have Abraham, and he's learning that, okay, you're going to have this child with Sarah. And it says in Genesis 17:17, and Abraham fell on his face and laughed, and he thought to himself, will a child be born to a man of 100 years old? And will Sarah give birth at 90? Because 100 was the age that of Abraham when the promised seed came, when Yitzhak was born. So, and I'm looking at this is, going back to this 100 here, that it is when we step out by faith that we see that promise come to fruition.
Well, the difference is that Young spoke into prayer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't that somebody, made it up. I mean, Yah said it. So when Yah says it, it's done.
Right. And it didn't happen right away.
Right.
It did not happen right away.
Okay, I got my answer.
Okay. Because, because Abraham or Avram, I mean, I'll sometimes use both names here. Avram left by faith from Haran when he was 75 years old. But Isaac wasn't born until he was 100. So that's another 25 years before that promise came to fruition.
So Ishmael and Isaac were both born when he was 100?
No, Ishmael was born before that. Because Ishmael was like 13 years older than him.
Okay.
Esau's the other one.
That's Jacob.
Yep.
Okay, so let's go through. And as we go through, we'll see that because we'll go into reading it. Okay. So I'm just looking at Genesis 1 and 2. And think about this. Okay, I'm going to go back and read it again in 1 and 2. Now, Yah says to Avram, get yourself out of your country, away from your kinsmen, away from your father's house, and go to the land that I will show you. And I will make a great nation of you, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you are to be a blessing. And so just thinking about the order of events, because I like things in order. If you're leaving a place, you would assume that the order would be you're going to leave your father's house first, and then you're going to journey outside of your neighborhood, and then you're going to eventually journey outside of your country. But when you look at the order that Yah gives him, it says, get yourself out of your country first, then away from your kinsmen, then away from your father's house. So the Torah lists it in the opposite order. Any thoughts on that? No.
Well, I'm just thinking, that what you said about having the courage, there's that scripture that says, be of good courage and I will strengthen your heart. So if you act in a courageous way first, then the strength will follow.
Yeah. And, I look at it, it's not necessarily focusing, like you're saying, on the physical movement there, but it's on his heart. Because what's going to be the harder test? To leave your country or to leave your own immediate family?
Right.
Yeah. So I look at it that Yah's teaching him and that, okay, this is going to be a test of your heart. Okay, let's see if you're able to do this. Then, and then you're going to have to go in the order of tests. And it is here from what is the easiest to you to the hardest to you. And that,
Right.
because your family, it's going to be easier to leave your country and then your extended family. But when it comes down to your immediate family, that is a test in obedience. Are you willing to take that? Because, it's hard to leave your parents and your, yeah.
Children.
And your children. Yep. And then to me, it makes me think about it wasn't just Abram's potential here that mattered. It was the action. Because Abram had to do something. He didn't just have to think about it or believe it. He actually had to do something.
He had to put action.
He had to put action to those beliefs. Yep. And in the ancient world, a man was identified as a member of his father's household. And when the head of the household died, then the heir would assume the title and the responsibilities, whatever property or land that they had. But he's called to leave his father's household. So Avram is really not only leaving his father's household, but he's giving up any inheritance or rights to the family property that he has. And when he gave up, that, he's basically forfeiting his security and laying it out there, because he's like, okay, I have no inheritance now. I have nothing. He's putting his whole survival, his identity, his future and security in the hands of Yah. Which a lot of times we don't think about that, but that's how, their lives was, their inheritance was handed down. And if you're leaving that, then you're setting yourself out there, but, by yourself. And then if you look in verse 3, and Yah promises him, he says, I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse anyone who curses you. And by you, all of the families of the earth will be blessed. Okay. So one of the first things, okay, I will bless those who bless you, and we take that. But then it says, but I will curse anyone who curses you. There are two different words used here for curse. Actually, there are three words in Hebrew for curse, but two of them are used here. It says I will curse anyone. That is the word coming from the root arar, okay, which literally means to curse. Says, I'm going to curse anyone who curses you. That second curse, anyone who curses you, is actually here. The second one is called, it's coming from the root kalal, which means to belittle, to make slight of, or to make them insignificant. So if you look at that verse, and where it says, I will curse, I'm going to curse anyone who kalal, belittles you or makes you insignificant or, slights you.
Can I just say something?
Yes, you can.
It sure doesn't seem like that is what is taking place.
When? Mm-hmm.
To the Jewish nation.
Right.
Because other nations that have surely
cursed them,
mm-hmm. are blessed beyond our imaginations.
In a lot of ways, but then again, yeah.
In the Arab world, I mean, all the oil that is around Israel, and they have none, but all of those nations are blessed with financial wealth, and yet they've slandered, cursed, and...
Okay, we're going to get into that, because this is also talking about Abraham and his seed, okay?
Okay.
Spiritually, they're not blessed.
Was also Abraham's seed? Ishmael. Where did Ishmael settle and live? Yeah. Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
UAE.
And even the
all of that. Yeah. Sons. So and they were blessed. So they do have a blessing in the physical wealth and the stuff of this earth, because Yah himself can't break his own word here. So they're going to have that. But
even look at Esau, how blessed he was.
yeah, even with Jacob and Esau, you're going to see that yeah. So you're going to see that. But it's also, what does that curse going to look like? Is it going to be coming down as far as you're completely exiled and out spiritually? You know what I'm saying?
You don't have
Yeah.
access to
the Father. Yeah.
to the Father unless you
Yeah.
repent.
Mm-hmm. And that's something to think about, because this is, to me, this is a big warning of what you're saying is belittling those people. Because yes, I do believe that Abraham is the father of Israel, but he's also considered the father of all those who believe.
Yeah.
And so I do believe that this verse holds and applies to the physical descendants, the literal physical descendants of Abraham, which we call Israel, but later, but many also look at the spiritual aspect and see this as applying to the spiritual descendants, And, I think it's interesting too that, some people look at this and they look at the spiritual side of it, yet they want to spiritualize it, that this is applying to us, that we're the true Israel and not them. But yet they disregard that this word was spoken to the physical descendants of him. So, they don't want to look at that.
That gives them
Yeah.
to say, where is it?
Yeah. It's just wanting to, yeah.
It's not that that they replaced Israel,
Right.
which is not true.
Right. Okay. I want to skip over, because looking at that word curse, kalal, that you were talking about belittling, it comes up again in the Parsha. Let's go to Genesis 16. And I'm going to go down to verse 4. Abram had sexual relations with Hagar, and she conceived. But when she became aware that she was pregnant, she looked on her mistress with contempt. And Sarai said to Abram, "This outrage being done to me is your fault. True, I gave my slave girl to you to sleep with, but when she saw that she was pregnant, she began holding me in contempt. May Yah decide who is right, I or you." Okay. And so I know I'm reading it out of the complete here. But it says, the version that I'm reading says that Sarah was treated with contempt. Does yours say something similar? May use a different word there about how Hagar was treated.
So Ishmael, didn't he kind of molest Isaac?
Later. Yeah. When we look at that word mitzahek. Yeah.
Okay.
But this is when she's pregnant with him. Okay. Despised. Okay. Yours says despised. So, but that word in Hebrew is that word kalal. Okay. And so here we see that Hagar is treating Sarah with this kalal, this contempt, this belittling. Okay. Well, go back to the very beginning. What is it? When a man and a woman are married, they are as one. So Sarah and Abraham are married, they are as one. And yet, I believe because Hagar is carrying the seed of Abraham, she wasn't cursed, because according to Genesis 12, 1 and 2, anybody who belittles you is going to be cursed.
So Hagar wasn't cursed.
But hey, I don't think she was cursed, because we see she's carrying his seed, which Abraham's seed has to be blessed. And, that blessing is going to be extended to Ishmael because he's Abraham's seed. And, it's not about belief here. It's just a physical seed. And the physical blessing is bestowed upon Abraham's physical descendants, as well as a result of Abraham's belief. And I think that's one of the reasons that we see, like, even so many Jewish people today that are so prosperous. A lot of people say, well, see there, they rule the world. You got all these banks, you've got all these businesses, these companies are ruled by all these Jews. But I think this is going back to the blessing on Abraham, that they were to be blessed.
And it even talked about being blessed with wealth.
Yeah.
They can use that word.
Yeah.
They got blessed.
Especially with Judah. Yeah. That they were going to be blessed with that. When you look
Yeah.
at in Genesis 49. Yeah.
That's what it was.
With Jacob's blessing on the tribes. And so, you know, and this blessing is given prior to the covenant with Abraham.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Now let's stop here a minute because I want to go back. Let's go back in last week's portion a little bit and I want to look at something. Okay. In Genesis 11, verse 31. Notice 11:31. Terach took his son Abram, his son Haran's son Lot, and Sarah his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they left from the Kasdim to go to the land of Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they stayed there. Okay. Now, a lot of times I think we just read that and we overlook it. But notice that Terach, Abram, Sarah, and Lot are all leaving Ur. And look at where they're going. They're going to Canaan. And they stopped. Yeah. So they were going to Canaan. And here we've got Terach. Abram's father was there too. He was going too. Let me stop. Just a second there. And you know, I mean, wait a second. He tells them, I mean, we've got Terach going, but we see in Genesis 12, Terach is not there. It is Abram, you know, talking about Abram and Lot and Sarah going, but we see originally it was Terach, Abram, Sarah, and Lot going. Okay. And I think this is a picture of, wait a minute, of what happens in many people's life today, prophetically, that they feel the calling to leave paganism, and that maybe, you know, Terach was called to leave, but yet he would only go so far in the walk. He would go to the edge of Haran and then stop. And notice that they all stayed and dwelled in Haran, because later that's where Abram leaves with Lot and Sarah, is from Haran. And so there are some that can't quite leave everything behind. Mm-hmm. And you think about, I mean, I know like most of us that are here, that we've been in this walk for a while. Think about years ago, some of the people that came out of the church with us, and they were walking up to a certain point, but then they stop. Some of them go back into the church. Some of them walk away totally. Some of them go, you know what I'm saying? It's just, it's like they're called out, but then they just can't fully cross over.
Mm-hmm.
You got something, Kim? Or Sandra?
I just said, mm-hmm.
Yeah. The thing about it, I mean, that's
not faced with that.
Yeah. We're all faced with that. And it's just like that continuing to, some can't quite leave everything behind. And I think that's a picture of like Terah there, because he was called to come out too. Okay. But we do see that Abram leaves everything behind, and throughout the years, you know, like I said, people come into the way, they get excited, they progress so far, but then they're still holding on to things of the world in this other hand, and then they don't let it go. Or their family, or their,
in general, that's what the church does here.
Yeah.
In general, that's what they do.
And Christianity has a very strong hold on all of us.
Yeah.
Because it's the way we were raised.
It's the way.
And it's traditions.
Mm-hmm.
It's not close to it.
Yeah.
To walk away from it. I remember when Susan decided that we were not putting up a Christmas tree.
Yeah.
That kind of broke my heart.
Yeah, we were talking about that yesterday, and I was like, I was trying to figure out, and we got to thinking about it. I said, I think the last time we put up a tree because Eddie did it one more year after me, and that was in 1999 was the last time we had a
Good for
Christmas tree.
y'all.
I was like, that is just,
Those, I said, I'll put up a tree that will, she'll decorate. Like
Yeah.
she's always done.
yeah. No, which I told Eddie before, and I was like, well, if you're going to do it, then you're going to put it up. I'm not touching
I look better than
it. Yeah. So, but I mean, you think about that. That's just, it's hard. Yeah. So,
I mean, I got
I
silk
remember
screen.
when me and Sandra we decided to,
giving somebody something that don't.
go ahead, Ken.
I remember when me and Sandra we decided to come out,
Mm-hmm.
and my parents they oh God they did not understand at all. But I thought it was what we needed to do, and
Mhm.
and that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
But they did honor me.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one time. I don't remember what it was. Maybe it was Thanksgiving or whatever it was, and they asked me to pray the Hebraic prayer for the blessing,
Mm-hmm.
and
That was moving. Yeah. Because at least
I felt so honored.
yeah.
Yeah.
Especially for them not knowing to be able just to recognize you and to give you that. Yeah. Yeah.
So you were still part of the family.
Yeah. And yeah. Because a lot of people look at us like, I mean, you think about how many friends we've lost along the way. I mean, now there are more people that are coming in to this walk or whatever, but again, how much is that cycle are we going to see? Here's something that I thought was interesting. If you look back at 1131, where they left to go to the land of Canaan. Now, wait a minute. They're told where they were going?
Well, he says to the land which I will show you.
Yeah, he says to the land which I will show you.
in 12.
So did y'all tell Avram where he was going? It seems contradictory. You know, it seems like it's contradictory because, people always like, well, Genesis 12, and they're going, oh, I'm going to get you to go to a land that I will show you, but he doesn't know where it's at. He's believing in blind faith. Yeah.
He was thinking like all the heathens was.
Mhm.
Oh, what Vegas.
Right.
Who taught him?
Yeah, who taught him? And that comes down to,
It didn't say that.
No.
It just said he called him out.
Yeah.
He came.
And so do you think about, well, and this is something I thought about here, and I've talked about this before, is that in years past, I talked about authorship. Could it be, and this is just a thought, that this is a later addition to Genesis? Because remember, I've talked about, how do I say this? That the only book that is written in first person is Deuteronomy. All the rest are written in third person. God said to Abraham, da 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 da. God said to Moses, da da da. But when we get to Deuteronomy, it says God said to me. And then, we have first person, I. Okay. We see an anachronism come up in this portion. Okay.
And what?
An anachronism.
You gonna go with that?
It's not anachronism.
What is anachronism? Okay, anachronism is something that is out of place of time, but we see it in that writing. Okay, let's go over to Genesis 14:14. Here's an example.
University word.
It's a university word. Okay, Genesis 14:14, and this is just one, and it comes up in this parsha. Okay. Okay, well, there's two of them. Well, there's two in Genesis 14. I just saw another one. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so Genesis 14:14.
Yeah.
When Avram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his trained servants, born of his own house, 318, and pursued them unto Dan. Okay,
Damn.
got it. Dan. That's the anachronism. Because during Avram's day, there was no Dan.
Okay.
Dan is one of the 12 tribes that's born to Jacob, to Yaakov. And if you look in Judges chapter 18, verse 27 through 29, we see the Danites capturing this land. And it's after that they name it Dan.
Yeah.
But how could it have already been called Dan here if no Dan existed yet? Okay, that's just one anachronism. The other one I just saw in chapter 14 is in verse 7. And they returned and came to En-Mishpat, which is Kadesh, and smote all the country of the Amalekites and also the Amorites that dwelt in Hazon Tamar.
Kadesh.
Amalek.
And
Amalek doesn't exist yet.
oh, really?
Yeah. So those are some anachronisms. So that's just something that I think, is an example of, I don't want to say like a editorial note.
Can you spell that word?
Anachronism?
Yeah.
Anachroism, I think. I can't spell in my head anachronism.
Okay.
Okay.
Question.
I have to look it up. I can't spell in my head. Yeah, I have to write it down. So that's just something, could it be that would be something that was added later that they were told where they were going? But because whoever was going back and compiling the book of Genesis actually knew that they were going there and they were called to go to Canaan, even though Yah didn't call them or tell them where to go. I don't know.
Wasn't it Moses who was supposed to have wrote the book of Genesis? Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Supposedly.
Yes. You weren't here for some of those, but I can talk about that after a review, but because we went through some of that with who wrote what. No. Okay. So let's look at Genesis 11, verse 27, because we're talking about Abram. And I wanted to look at his life because this is what we're really focused on here is choosing of one family here. And Genesis 11:27. Here's the genealogy of Terach. Terach fathered Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And Haran fathered Lot. Haran died before his father in father Terach in the land where he was born in Ur of Kasdim. Then Abram and Nahor took wives for themselves. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, the daughter of Haran. He was the father of Milcah and Yiscah. Sarah was barren; she had no child. And Terach took his son Abram, his son Haran's son Lot, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, his son Avram's wife, and they left Ur of the Kasdim to go to the land of Canaan. And when they came to Haran, they stayed there, and Terach lived 205 years. He died in Haran. Now Yah said to Avram, get yourself out of your country, away from your kinsmen, away from your father's house, and go to the land I will show you. So, as we tend to read in scripture, it's like it's all in chronological order, but we've talked about in the past how scripture is not written in chronological order. Okay, we see it as, Terach took Avram and his family to Haran, and then and then Terach died and Avram left. That doesn't necessarily add up because you look at the numbers, okay? Genesis 11:26, Terach lived 70 years and fathered Avram, Nahor, and Haran. Okay, so we got Terach's age, and we've got him fathering Avram, Nahor, and Haran. So even Josephus, first century historian, writes in the Antiquities of the Jews, book 149, 149, it says, for Terah begot Avram in his 70th year. Now Nahor begot Haran, and he was 100, and 20 years old. And okay, but anyway, so if Terah was 70 years old when he fathered Avram, and Avram was 75 when he left, 70 plus 75, that would make Terah 145 when Avram left. But we're taught that Avram didn't leave until Terah died. Okay. In Genesis 11:32, it says Terah lived, though, how many years?
250.
250 or 205?
Oh, 5.
205. Yeah, 205 years.
Yeah.
And then he died in Haran. So if he lived to be 205, that means he lived another 60 years in Haran after Avram left, which that would have been a test to see if Avram was willing to follow Yah at all costs. And it was, a test for Terah, and Terah, of course, wasn't, we know he doesn't leave because it says that he died there. He wasn't willing to leave there.
Nahor stayed with him.
Mm-hmm. So, and then yet we see that Yah spoke to Avram, while he was living in the midst of Babylon. In Genesis 15:6, we see that it says, he believed in Yah and it was credited to him as righteousness. Then he said to him, I am Yah who brought you out of Ur Kasdim to give you this land as a possession. And so it is because he believed it was counted for his righteousness. And we see that confirmed in Romans chapter 4. In verse 3, it says, that Abraham put his faith and trust in God, and it was credited to him as accounted for righteousness. So basically, Yah was like drawing him like a bride to see, are you willing to do that? He was tugging at his heartstrings, and Avram had the choice to accept or not. And, do we feel Yah tugging at our hearts today? He's calling us while we're living in the midst of Babylon, and we're called to come out. And it's not just a physical movement, but it's a spiritual movement. We're called to leave those things that sometimes spiritually, are attachments to those things of the world of Babylon. And, one day we may be asked to physically leave everything behind for Yah. And are we willing to do that? Are we concerned about building things up in this world, or a name for ourselves, just like the Tower of Babel? Okay. That's just some questions to think about. Genesis 12:5.
I want to say something.
Okay.
I think you said, I don't know what you said, but it kind of brought my mind to this. The Battle of New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
In 1814, we took a little trip along with Colonel Jackson down to Miami, Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
We took a little bacon, we took a little beans. We caught the bloody British in our town of New Orleans.
It made you think of that.
Some reason or another.
I don't know.
We
Okay.
fired our guns and we kept British kept
Yep.
coming. There was a many.
That's crazy. Yep.
I'm
Think about
teasing.
that. You think,
I'm
I don't
teasing.
know why your brain went there, but that's okay.
All right.
Okay. So Genesis 12:5. Abram took his wife Sarah, his brother's son Lot, and all their possessions which they had accumulated, as well as the people they had acquired in Haran. And then they set out for the land of Canaan and entered the land of Canaan. And Abram passed through the land to the place called Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. And the Canaanites were in the land. And Yah appeared to Abram and said, to your descendants I will give this land. So he built an altar there to Yah who had appeared to him. So Abram enters the land, and the first place he goes to is Shechem. And he goes to this oak of Moreh. And it's actually an Elyon, like Elyon. The Elon is the tree. And it's likely that this Oak of Moreh is actually a big landmark in Shechem. Because, if you think about in the Middle East, a large tree functioned not as just a source of shade and stuff, but it was also where in ancient times you would see like a rabbi or a teacher would come, which what do you call a teacher? A moreh. They would come and they would sit under the shade of the tree and they would judge and hear legal cases. You also see this done in, talk about in Judges chapter 4, where it talks about Deborah sitting under the palm tree. And there are also references of that in the Ugaritic text, epic, the Ugaritic epic, that's hard to say, Achat, I guess is how you pronounce that in Ugarit. It talks about Daniel's judgment tree, that during ancient times that you would see a judge come and sit under a tree and teach and judge. So this is probably, a big tree there that existed during that time that you would have people that would come, and judge and sit under and whatever and sit in the shade. Okay, Genesis 12:10. But there was a famine in the land, so Abram went down into Egypt to stay there because the famine in the land was severe. And when he came close to Egypt and he was about to enter, he said to Sarah, his wife, now, I know that you are a good-looking woman, so that when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife, and kill me and keep you alive. Please say that you're my sister, so that it will all go well with me for your sake, so that I will stay alive because of you. And when Abram entered into Egypt, the Egyptians did notice that the woman was very beautiful. And Pharaoh's princess saw her and commended her to Pharaoh. So the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. So he treated Abram well for her sake, giving him sheep, cattle, male, female donkeys, male and female slaves. But Yah inflicted great plagues on Pharaoh and his household because of Abram's wife. And Pharaoh called Abram and said, what is this that you've done to me? Why didn't you tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister, so that I took her to be my own wife? Now, therefore, here is your wife. Take her and go away. So Pharaoh gave orders concerning him and his men, that they sent him away with his wife and everything he had. So we got the first recorded instance of a famine. Yah does not tell Abraham to even go to Egypt. Yah just told him he's going to bless them, and then we see a famine coming. And so, find it interesting that right after stepping out in obedience, Avram's encountering a difficulty. A famine. We aren't promised that we won't have difficulties when we're following him. Because even, I just looked at a couple of verses, John 16:33. It says, but I've said these things to you so that you will be united with me and you may have shalom, because in this world you're going to have trials, but be brave, for I've conquered the world. So, he tells us that we're going to have trials in this world. And
he was right.
Yeah. And so
where did he enter Canaan? The northern part?
Yes.
And then he traveled all the way south
Down to Shechem. Mm-hmm. And then so as we're going down too, we see here too that interesting passage happens with Sarah. Abram tells Sarah to tell him, that she's his sister.
He tells her to lie.
Yeah. Okay. Is Abram telling Sarah to lie in order to protect themselves? Or is he telling the truth that she is his sister? What does it mean?
Well, but the one thing she was his wife.
She was his wife, yes.
She was his wife. So you really can't get around that.
Yeah, he's fearing. Yeah.
Feared for his death.
Yeah.
He's feared for his life. Yeah. And we can see that. We know that's his wife. He feared for his life. I mean, we even think about, marrying your sister in modern times is frowned upon, and yeah.
So, who was Sarah's?
Okay, so that's what we're going to look at. Okay, first of all, let's go over to Genesis chapter 20 a minute, because we see this come up again. And Genesis, it happened here in Egypt, but we see in Genesis chapter 20, it happens again that Avram, in verse 2, Abraham was saying of Sarah, his wife, she is my sister. So that Abimelech, the king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah.
Could she have been both?
Okay. Could she have been both? If you go down to verse 12 in chapter 20, it says, but she is actually also my sister, the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, so that she has become my wife. Okay. So he's saying that she's the daughter of his father.
Sure.
Okay. So, which would have been Terah. Okay.
But do we ever find out the name of the woman?
Do we ever find out? Okay. So Avram, like I said, he did that same thing. But wait a second. Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 27. And as you're turning there, can the word contradict or break itself?
Contradict what?
Itself or break its own self. It's not supposed to. Okay. So Deuteronomy 27. Let's go down to verse 22. A curse on anyone who has sexual relations with his sister, no matter whether she is the daughter of his father or his mother. Okay. So it seems that Abram just said that he's married to his half sister because she was the daughter of his father, but they didn't have the same mother. In Deuteronomy, it clearly says a curse on anyone who has relations with their sister. It doesn't matter if it's
Half or not?
half or not.
Okay.
Explain. That's a good question. Well, because a lot of times people will point out these contradictions and say, oh, see, the Bible can't be trusted.
Okay.
Okay, so let's go to Leviticus 18. It gives a little bit more on this.
Leviticus 18.
Let's go down to verse 6.
Verse 6.
None of you is to approach anyone who is a close relative in order to have sexual relations, for I'm Yah. You're not to have relations with your father. You're not to have relations with your mother. She is your mother. Do not have relations with her. You're not to have relations with your father's wife. That is your father's prerogative. You're not to have relations with your sister, the daughter of your father, or the daughter of your mother.
Where are you at again?
In Leviticus 18, verse 9. So it doesn't matter if it's of your mother or your father. Do not have relations with them. So as we read in Leviticus 18, as well as Deuteronomy 27, it's a sin to marry your sister.
You're 18:6?
9. Yeah. And I went to 18:6 and I started reading through 9.
18. Oh, I'm in freaking numbers. Goodness, I'm saying to you.
Okay.
Okay.
Terry's in the wrong book. Okay. So how is this possible?
It's not.
Is he lying then? Okay. So there's a couple of possibilities. One is people look at this and say, oh, it is a contradiction. And, the Bible isn't true because there are contradictions. I don't agree with that. I believe if there's a contradiction, it's because of our misunderstanding of the scriptures. Okay. Second thing, some people say, well, Abraham didn't sin because the law was given after Abraham, because it was given to Moses, and that these laws don't apply to prior to Moses's day.
That's
Very interesting.
Okay. And many people will use that to say that y'all had a different set of rules then, which
The same yesterday, today, and forever.
yes, I disagree with that. And I believe that Yah's word never changes and that we're held to the same standards. Okay. But he says he never changes. So he's the same yesterday, today, and forever. So, that's like Terry, that's a good point. Okay. So, yet I don't think that is true. And, it even says in Genesis 26:5 that all of this because Abraham heeded what I said and did what I told him to do. He followed my mitzvot, my regulations, and my teachings.
Yeah.
So, third option is some people say, well, that Abraham sinned by marrying Sarah because she was his sister, and that Yah sanctioned that because they were married.
Before he knew that,
Yeah.
you're talking about?
Yeah,
Before
that's-
He knew the commandments?
Yeah, so that's possible, but I don't think that that's it. And then we're also like, lastly, I think we're, misunderstanding what it says. I feel like there's more going back into the history of it. And we start looking at Abraham and Sarah's background a little more. I want to go back to the passage that I read earlier in Genesis 11. And I'm going to look at verse 29. 11:29, where it says, "The Avram and Nahor took wives for themselves. The name of Avram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, the daughter of Haran. He was the father of Milcah and Yiscah." Okay. And so Abraham's father was Terach. Abraham had two brothers, Nahor and Haran. Okay. Nahor married the niece of Haran's daughter.
Married his niece.
He married his niece. Okay. And when you look at this, it's plausible that Haran was the older brother because he died. And we don't really get much more in scripture there, but you can look at like some his Josephus writings and stuff to get a little bit more information too. In Josephus's writings in Antiquities of the Jews, it says that Avram had two brothers, Nahor and Haran left a son, Lot, but he also left Sarah and Milcah. Okay. Now, what we don't see there is, okay, we know that we've got Nahor marrying one of the daughters of Haran, marrying his niece, which was Milcah. But we see that it also says that Haran was the father of not only Lot, Milcah, and Yiscah. But in Josephus's writings, Haran was the father of Lot, Milcah, and Sarah. Okay. I don't necessarily agree with the book of Yasher, but just the book of Yasher.
It's interesting the way it is mentioned in 20.
Yeah.
They took for themselves wives. It doesn't indicate that Sarah was the daughter of Haran, but in that same passage, it could be suggested.
Yeah. And when you even look at like what the book of Yasher, which I don't agree with everything there, but the book of Yasher says too that Haran, his wife conceived and bare a son named Lot, and she conceived again and bore a daughter, which she named Milcah, and then she conceived again and bore a daughter, which she called Sarai. So even when you start looking at the book of Yasher, and then you keep going down in the book of Yasher in chapter 12, verse 44, it even says that Sarai was also called Iscah. So when you look at that, if that is true, that Haran dies he has 3 children, Lot, Sarah, and Milcah, but Sarah is also called Ishka, which is referenced in this verse. Then Abram married his niece, which would have been acceptable because what happened? Her father died, and what happens if the head of the household dies? The daughters, you marry off to a relative. Okay. And so, it's sort of, and then, so is she his sister? No, she's literally, if that's true, his niece. But there are also indications in Josephus's, not only in Josephus's writings, but when you look at scripture, let's go to, when I went to Genesis 14, we're talking about Lot being captured. Lot is Abram's nephew. But in Genesis 14, I'm going to start in verse 14. It says, when Abram heard that his nephew had been taken captive, he led out his trained men who had been born in his house, 318 of them, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. During the night, he and his servants divided the forces against them. Then he attacked and pursued them all the way to Hovah, north of Damascus. And he recovered all of the goods and brought back his nephew, is the way the complete words it. But if you read it in the King James, it says he brings back his brother, Lot. And in the Hebrew, it uses ach, which is brother. But they weren't brothers.
He was his nephew.
It was literally his nephew. But what do we, growing up, for those of us brought up in the church, or which I wasn't brought up in the church, but those brought up in the church, what do you call people in the body when you go out and you see them in public? Brother, sister? Yes. And it's like that same concept is used here, that even in ancient times that you would see people in your family, even though literally they might have been nephews or whatever, or cousins, you would call them brother and sister because you are part of the family. So when he is literally saying that she is my sister, it doesn't mean that she was literally physically my sister, but that she was my sister in the family. You see what I'm saying? So is he lying? No, in a way, no. Yeah, I mean, because that would have been,
He's like all of us, man. We all walk in fear.
Yeah.
You growing up against a great king, and
Mm-hmm.
you know this king is gonna see your wife who is absolutely stunning. He gonna want her because that's the way kings operated in the.
And you think, wait a minute, she was 10 years younger than him?
Yeah.
Well, when he was called out, he was 75.
Yeah.
Well, after he left, it was, so she had to be between 65
Yeah, she was
and 90.
somewhere in that 65 years old.
Yeah, she didn't look any more than 50. She was a good looking woman.
Fine.
So, and you think about too, well, I won't even go there. Okay. Because that was just a different one. So with that, I know that was a hodgepodge, but just thinking about, is he literally lying there? The question, and he's concerned about his safety. And, as he's going into Egypt, there's this famine, in chapter 13. Genesis 13:1. Abram went up from Egypt, he, his wife, and everything he had, and Lot with him into the Negev. And Abram became wealthy. He had much cattle, silver, and gold. And as he went on his travels from Negev, he came to Baal, the place where his tent had been at the beginning between Baal and Ai, where he built the first altar. And there Abram had called on the name of Yah. Lot, who was traveling with Abram, also had flocks, herds, and tents, but the land could not support them living together, because of their possessions were too great for them to remain there together. Moreover, quarreling arose between Abram and Lot's herdsmen. And the Canaanite and the Perizzite were then living in the land. And Abram said to Lot, please, let's not have quarreling between me and you, and between my herdsmen and yours, since we're kinsmen. Isn't the whole land there in front of you? Please separate yourself from me. If you go to the left, I will go to the right. And if you go to the right, I will go to the left. And Lot looked up and saw the whole plain of the Jordan was well watered everywhere before Yah destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, like the garden that of Yah, like the land of Egypt in the direction of Zoar. So Lot chose all of the plain of the Jordan for himself, and Lot traveled eastward. Thus they separated themselves from each other. Avram lived in the land of the Canaanite, and Lot lived in the cities of the plain, setting up his tent near Sodom. So here we see Lot and Abram having, a disagreement about the land. And Lot looks with his eyes, and he chose the area of the plain of the Jordan around Sodom and Gomorrah, at the southern end of the Dead Sea of the Negev. That would be toward, you have Bethel, and then and then it would have been that way eastward. This is at the southern end of the Dead Sea. If you're thinking about Israel map, the Dead Sea is going to be at the southern end in the Negev area. And, that's today dry desert area. But before Sodom's destruction, it was well watered, like the Garden of Eden. It's, in verse 10, it's called like the Garden of Eden. And we see that Lot traveled.
It's down below the Dead Sea?
Yeah.
Would the Dead Sea have not been the Dead Sea at that time, possibly?
It's a possibility.
Because the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, that could have turned
it differently, yeah. And we see that Lot traveled eastward away from the land of Israel. And so in ancient Near East culture or thought, when you're moving eastward, you're moving away from Yah. Okay. And so Lot was not only physically moving away, but we know that there was also a spiritual move that happens with Lot. Because later, in Genesis 19, when the two angels, came to Avram, and they came to Sodom that evening, Lot was sitting at the gate. Well, in ancient times, it was customary for elders and judges and leaders of the people to sit at the city gates to judge the people. And so we've got Lot sitting at the gate. So he is like a leader of Sodom. And we also, see evidence of this throughout the Tanakh in Proverbs 31, where it talks about, the virtuous woman, that her husband would be known at the city gates, that he would be there amongst the leaders of the land. And, so Lot definitely was moving spiritually away from Yah. Now we know that Avram went to the west into Canaan. And we know that, it was called Canaan because it descended from the Ham's line, Canaan, and which was one of the sons of Noah. And so basically the area that he's going into is distant relatives, because.
So this area of Canaan is part of Ham's.
That's where Ham's descendants, settled.
And Ham's descendants, they were pretty despicable.
Yes. Yep.
But they were given many, many chances to
Yep.
repent.
Is that
They
one of the reasons we can't eat ham?
No. Eddie, don't be funny. That's not one of the reasons we can't eat ham. Okay. But, okay. So in Genesis 13 and 14, and Yah said to Avram, after Lot had moved away from him, look all around from where you are, the north, the south, the east, and the west. All the land you see, I will give to you and your descendants, and I will make your descendants as numerous as the specks of the dust of the earth. So if that person can count the specks of the dust on the earth, then your descendants can be counted. Get up and walk through the length and breadth of the land, because I will give it to you. So to me, this stuck out. The land is Yah's. It's his to give. And the land was given to Avram and his descendants forever. And this is not only, I think of talking about physical descendants, but also about the descendants who are grafted in. And then we get into the next part where, you got to remember that the population of the earth was much smaller in Avram's day. And so there was a lot more available space for people to settle. And they had large areas of like what's no man's land, and marauders were often found in those areas, because they knew people would travel that way. And you've got to remember that during those times, Israel was along the trade route, the main trade route. So that was, a main area to get supplies, even from Egypt all the way up, over into Mesopotamia and everything. That was the, main route that you would go through. Okay. And that a lot of times you didn't have defined borders. You didn't have like, oh, here's the line and now you're crossing into North Carolina, South Carolina, whatever. You didn't have these defined borders. And many of the areas and regions were ruled by clans or families, or set appointed kings. And that's what we see when we move into Genesis 14. Okay. And Genesis 14 and verse 1. Okay, Genesis 14 and 1. When Amraphel, the king of Shinar, Arok, king of Elasar, Kedar Laomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goyim, they made war against Bera, king of Sodom, and against Birsha, king of Amara, Shanav, king of Admah, Shemever, king of Zoim, and the king of Bela, which is the same Zaor. And all the latter kings joined forces in the Siddim Valley where the Dead Sea is. They had served Kedar Laomer 12 years, but in the 13th year they rebelled. And in the 14th year, Kedar Laomer and the kings with him came and defeated the Rephaim in Asherut Karnaim. The Rephaim. The Zuzim and Ham, the Emanim and the Shaveh, Kiryat Tamim, and the Hori at Seir. They're mountain and all the way to Il Paran by the desert. Next, they turned back and came to En Mishpat, which is the same as Kadesh, and defeated all the country of the Amaleki, and also the Emori who lived in Hazon Tamar. Then the kings of Sodom, Amara, Admah, Zboim, and Bela, that is Zoar, came out and arrayed themselves for battle in the Siddim Valley. So here we've got a battle basically going on between 4 northern kings and 5 southern kings. Okay. And this is like, I mentioned, we've got that anachronism here in 14 because that's where you got Amalek mentioned, and Amalek doesn't even exist yet. Okay. Then in verse 9, if we look at verse 9, against Kedar Laomer, king of Elam, Tidal, king of Goyim, Amraphel, king of Admah, and Ariot, king of Elasar, 4 kings against 5. Now the Siddim Valley was full of clay pits, and when the kings of Sodom and Amorah fled, some of them fell while the rest fled to the hills. The victors all took their possessions of Sodom and Amorah and all their food supply, and then they left. But as they left, they took Lot, Avram's brother, son, and his possessions, since he was living in Sodom. So, Avram is basically a peaceful man. He doesn't get involved in this battle until one of his family members is taken. Yeah, and I believe that this battle holds another picture here. So because we've got these 4 northern kings, Mesopotamian kings, attacking the 5 Jordanian plain kings. And if you look at the names of all these kings on both of the sides, they're all evil. Okay. Like the 4 kings, the Mesopotamian kings, this is what their names mean: slayer of darkness, lion-like, handful of sheaves, and a great sun. And where are they from? Babylon, Iraq, Iran, and the nations. Okay. And they make war with these 5 southern kings, which are son of evil, with iniquity, splendor of the father, lofty flight, and destruction. So neither of these sides are really good. Okay. Yeah, their names are pretty bad. And if you look at like some of the ancient Sumerian cuneiform inscriptions, The Assyrian scholars believe that Amraphel is actually Hammurabi. Okay. And Hammurabi's name is actually Hammurabi, or Ham the Great. And, he is considered to be the great descendant of Ham, which was the Nimrod. Okay. So Amraphel is identified as being both Nimrod and Hammurabi. So, and I tend to think that Nimrod is a title like Melchizedek and not an actual name, because Nimrod really means rebellion. So we're going to get that. So also in the Pseudo-Jonathan Targum, it states that Amraphel is Nimrod. So now, like I said, this would link with being Noah's great grandson. So basically, this is a battle between Nimrod and Abraham, in essence, because we've got the two sons of Noah, Ham's line and Shem's line, that are going to be battling. And this battle was not just a turn and, fight. It was basically trying to control an empire or area. And the northern kings wanted to control the area and wipe out the southern kings. And eventually, there was a revolt of those southern kings. Okay. I will put a map and I'll show that a little bit later, just so you can see how they go and start battling and everything. But Abraham would have been greatly outnumbered in this battle, 10-1.
He didn't have.
Yeah, he didn't have to.
15 people.
Yeah, 318 people. And, the issue for the cities of the Jordanian plain was for them to be under the influence of this Babylonian Mesopotamian rule. And Yah's plan for them was to be rescued through these events. And so, you've got these two groups that are battling, and, here comes Abraham in the mix, and he's overmatched, and a miracle occurs. In verse 13, Genesis 14:13, someone had escaped and told Abram, the Hebrew, who was living by the oaks of Mamre, the Emori, the brother of Eshcol, and the brother of Aner. All of them were allies of Avram. And when Avram heard that his nephew had been taken captive, he led out his trained men who had been born in his house, 318 of them, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. And during the night, he and his servants divided his forces against them. Then they attacked and pursued all the way to Hovah, north of Damascus. And he recovered all the goods and brought back his nephew Lot with his goods, together with the women and other people. So the first thing, Avram is called a Hebrew here. That's the very first occurrence we see of the word, is him being called an Ivri, a Hebrew. And he took 318 trained men in his own house, and Avram crossed over. He was following Yah, and those trained men in his house is a picture, if they're being born in his house, they're being, believers, they're following Torah, they're following Yah, and they go all the way up to Dan. Well, Dan means judge. And he takes 318 men. Well, which is interesting because 318 is also the value of Eliezer, which is Abraham's servant. It's the same value as his name. And Eliezer's name means, my God is my help. So these are 318 faithful servants that are trained and dedicated in recognizing, God is their help. And so Avram and the kings attack by night. They pursue him to Hovah, which Hovah means hiding place. And that's where they're defeated and plundered. Now, Avram and 318 men are pursuing 4 different armies.
4 or 5?
4. The northern 4. And they defeat them.
They had 5
And the southern one.
Southern.
Yes, they were fighting the Jordanian ones in the south. Okay, so you got Abraham and 318 men are fighting 4 different armies, and they defeat them.
And they go as far as the north of Damascus.
Yes.
That's pretty far up.
That's
there.
pretty far up.
Syria?
Yes. Mm-hmm. So, when you think about that, Yeah, that's definitely, and this is, a lot of times called the Battle of the Nine Kings. But, I'm looking at this picture as here's a lesson for us that we are to be peacemakers, but there comes a time when we must fight, and we are called to be what? An army. If we go to Genesis 14:17, it says, after his return from the slaughtering, Kedar-laomer and the kings with him, and the king of Sodom went out to meet him in the Shaveh Valley, which is also known as the King's Valley. And Melchizedek, king of Shalem, brought out bread and wine. And he was Cohen of El Elyon. So he blessed him with these words, blessed be Avram by El Elyon, maker of heaven and earth, and blessed be El Elyon, who handed your enemies over to you. And Avram gave him a tenth of everything. And the king of Sodom said to Avram, give me the people and keep the goods for yourself. But Avram answered the king of Sodom, I have raised my hand in an oath to Yah Elyon, maker of heaven and earth, that I will not take as much as a thread or a sandal thong or anything of yours, so that you won't be able to say that I made Avram rich. I will only take what my troops have eaten, and let the share of the spoil belong to the men who came with me. Honor Eshcol and Mamre, and let them have their share. So Avram meets Melchizedek, king of Shalem. And there are many viewpoints on who Melchizedek is. Some thinks he's Yeshua, some thinks, he's God himself, some thinks others not. So what do you think, Eddie?
The priest of our,
What do you think?
he wasn't Yeshua.
Okay. You don't think he's Yeshua?
No, I don't think he's,
No, y'all don't think he's Yeshua?
no. Yeshua's not incarnated here.
Not incarnate. Okay.
That would be his first
Parents,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
first appearance.
Okay.
first
So
time.
I'm just going to go through mine. And so,
I'll tell you, you're right.
so first, what do we know about him in scripture? In verse 18, we see that he is the king of Shalem, and he was a king. He was priest, a Cohen of the Most High. Okay. So he was king and priest.
Where was this, his kingdom located?
Where's Shalem? Okay. We're going to get there.
I can tell you.
Okay.
Go ahead. Oh, yeah.
He received a tenth from Avram. Okay. We see that in scripture too.
Received a tithe.
He received like a tithe. Okay.
Yeah.
We also see him mentioned in Psalms 110, verse 4. It says that Yah has sworn it that he will never retract it. You are a Cohen forever, to be compared with Melchizedek. Talking about the Mashiach's priesthood is going to be likened to Melchizedek. Okay. And in Hebrews chapter 7, we see him referenced. It says, this is Melchizedek, king of Shalem, a Cohen of God Ha-Elyon, met Abraham on his way back from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him, and Abraham gave a tenth of everything. Now, first of all, by translation, his name is the King of Righteousness. He is also the King of Shalem, which means King of Peace. There is no record of his father or mother, ancestry, birth, or death. Rather, like the Son of God, he continues as a Cohen for all time. Just think how great he was. Even the patriarch Abraham gave him a tenth of the choicest spoils, and that's Hebrews 7, 1 through 4. Okay, so he's said to be without father or mother, without descent. He doesn't have a beginning of days or end of days. Okay, that's interesting. So, my beliefs. I think he's actually Shem, because first there was an actual king who ruled over Shalem.
Jericho.
Okay, a city, yeah, and we know that this area was close to the north of Sodom, and the king of Sodom, because king of Sodom comes out to meet Abraham after he chased those kings away. Okay, and Shalem is an ancient name of Jerusalem, because what does Yerushalayim mean? Yeru means city of.
Yeah.
Shalem means peace.
Yeah.
So it's the city of peace. So Melchizedek was the king of Jerusalem. And Shem at that time would have left the area of Mesopotamia, came to Jerusalem. In Genesis 14 and 17, it refers to the valley of Shaveh, which is also called the King's Valley, which is also called by archaeologists today the Kidron Valley. So the Kidron Valley is the valley that separates Mount Zion from the Mount of Olives, which is also called the Valley of Jehoshaphat. So this further indicates that it's in the area of Jerusalem. Okay. Now, other sources point toward Shem being this. I know in the book of Yasher, it refers to Melchizedek as being Shem. I think, like I said, Melchizedek is a title, and it clearly tells you that in Hebrews that this is what the meaning of that means, is it is the king of righteousness. Even in the book of Yasher, we see him called the Adonai Zedek, which is also righteous Lord. So, in the pseudo,
That's what Abraham was called too.
yeah,
A Zedek, a man of righteousness.
right. And the pseudo Jonathan Targum, it also states that Shem is Melchizedek. Okay, so there's a lot of other sources out there that point toward Shem being Melchizedek. But people always go back, well, see, it's talking about in Hebrews that he has no father or mother, he has no beginning or no end, so therefore it has got to be Yeshua.
Yeah.
Well, wait a minute. Did Yeshua have a father?
Yes.
Hmm.
And he had a beginning and end.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because he is the beginning.
Yeah. So during the pre-flood generation, remember, they lived much longer than those that were born after the flood. So those that were born after the flood, their perspective of the people that survived the flood, that were living these long lifespans, would have been different. Because if you think about the people in Noah's family, they lived a lot longer
5, 6, 7
than their children and grandchildren. Okay.
It was 500 whenever the flood.
So the people in Noah's family appeared to be immortal. They became like the stuff of these legends. And it seemed like they didn't have a mother or father because they were outliving, children and grandchildren. And if you go to Genesis 11, it preserves the lineage of Abraham and his lifespans. And if you look at the calculations, the mathematical calculations, all named members of the lineage between Noah and Abraham were from Noah all the way up to Abraham were still alive when Abraham was born. This means that, Abraham was able to receive directly from Noah and Shem about the flood because they were still alive.
Jacob.
Yeah, they were still alive. Yeah. And so according to Genesis 11, Noah died when Abraham was 60 years old.
Noah did?
Yes.
Noah died
when Abraham was 60 years old.
Wow.
I'm 68.
Yeah.
Wow.
So when you look back at Shem's lineage and we add up all the ages, we see that Shem was 390 years old when Abraham was born.
What? Do we know all the years of Shem?
And Shem, he lived another 210 years.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Abram died.
And Abraham lived 175 years. Mm-hmm. Shem outlived Abraham by 35 years.
And he was the king of Israel.
Yes. And so the book of Yasher tells, of Abraham, even they say that, he's Melchizedek, and that Abraham goes there and he sits and learns from him. Okay. That's according to the book of Yasher. And so, whether you agree or not, that's my take.
He was traveling the land of.
He was traveling. He was traveling
the land of it.
Yep, and he would have, met up with relatives or whatever there. Why was
possible he went back there every year to maybe
worship? Yeah,
worship.
Yeah, and we see him paying a tithe.
Yeah,
where we're looking like, oh, will you pay a tithe to the Lord, whatever, and it has to be. But we fail to take into account that if you are a king or a clan leader or a ruler, because remember, they didn't have all these kings like we think of today, like those delineated territories, that if you had one that was stronger and one that was weaker, and you made an alliance with them, this was the suzerain, this is the vassal, you would pay tribute to the suzerain. So you would pay tribute to that king. So when he's giving that tithe to him, he's actually paying tribute to the other king. And if you notice in that passage we read about the king of Sodom, you remember what he tells the king of Sodom? He says, I can't take anything from you. Why? Because he already gave money to Shem or Melchizedek. He's under that suzerain. And if he took money from this other king, he's paying tribute. It's like he's accepting tribute to him, and that they can't, you know what I'm saying? That he's showing alliance to a different king. And he's saying, no, I can't take anything there. I can only take of what my men ate and drank. So
Very good explanation.
but that's just and I know there's different thoughts on it. And I know I just saw one this morning that a prominent teacher came out about, talking about why it was Yeshua or God or whatever. And he says, one of the reasons he talks about was him, well, there were others that were priests that before that weren't of the tribe of Levi. And I'm like, yeah, there were priests because Levi didn't exist. God didn't choose Levites till later. So, and then he's like, well, you got to look at 1 Samuel that in 1 Samuel, it talks about Samuel going in and ministering, and he wasn't a Levite. And I'm like, no, you go back and look at not First Corinthians, but First Chronicles, it clearly says that Samuel is a descendant of Korach. And who was Korach?
Yeah.
A Levite.
Yeah.
So even though Samuel, Eli and Hophni, did Eli's sons, Hophni and Phinehas, did wrong, Yah had a backup Levite in Samuel being raised in there. He was still from the line of Levi there.
Still.
But but yeah, there's a couple of things there. Okay. Moving on to chapter 15.
We got that straight now.
Genesis 15:1. And sometime later, the word of Yah came into Abram in a vision. Don't be afraid, Abram. I'm your protector. Your reward will be very great. And Abram replied, Yah Elohim, what good will your gifts be to me if I continue to be childless? And Eliezer from Damascus inherits my possessions. You haven't given me a child. And Abram continued and said, someone born in my house someone born in my house will be my heir. But the word of Yah came to him and said, this man will not be your heir. No, your heir will be a child from your own body. And then he brought him outside and said, look up at the sky, count the stars. If you can count them, your descendants will be that many. And he believed in Yah as he credited to him as righteousness. Now, remember back in chapter 12, Yah had already promised that he would make him a great name and he would give him the land and to his descendants forever. And then here we get this confirmation about his descendants. And, Abram, has the promise of Yah on him. And he says, okay, you're going to have this, to have him as a shield and a great reward. But he's convinced that Eliezer is going to be his heir. But Yah tells him, no, it's going to be your own seed. And in Genesis 15:4, when it says that seed, it's actually singular, even though we know that he has two sons. We know that he has Ishmael and Isaac. But yet there's only one heir, which is Yitzhak. And then we get to verse 7. And then he said to him, I am Yah who brought you out from Ur of Kasdim to give you a land as your possession. And he replied, Yah Elohim, how am I going to know that I will possess it? And he answered him, bring me a 3-year-old cow, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, a dove, and a young pigeon. And he brought him all of these and cut the animals in two and placed the pieces opposite each other. But he did not cut the birds in half. Then birds of prey swooped down on the carcass, and Avram drove them away. And as the sun was about to set, deep sleep fell upon Avram. Horror and great darkness overcame him. And Yah said to Avram, know this for certain, your descendants will be foreigners in land that is not theirs. They will be slaves and held in oppression there for 400 years. But I will also judge that nation, the one who makes them slaves, and afterwards they will leave with many possessions. As for you, you will join your ancestors in peace and be buried at a good old age. Only in the 4th generation will your descendants come back here, because only then will the Emori be ripe for punishment. And after the sun had set, there was thick darkness, a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch appeared, which passed between these animal parts. And the day Yah made a covenant with Avram, I have given this land to your descendants, from the Wadi of Egypt to the great river, Euphrates River, the territory of the Canaanite, the Kenizi, the Kadoni, the Heviti, the Perizi, the Rephaim, the Emori, the Canaani, the Gerashi, and the Yebusi. So here we've got the covenant of pieces. And we see that Avram is commanded to bring these animals and cut them in half. And we see that in verse 7, the sun had already set and Avram goes to sleep. So all of this happens while Avram is asleep. And it says that a smoking fire pot, is going to go between the pieces. Okay. There's a smoking fire pot and esh lapid, a flaming torch. And the smoking fire pot in Hebrew is actually the word tanur. Okay. It's a ancient oven used in ancient times, and it's still used in ancient cultures today. Let me see if I can share this picture with you, because I do have a picture of a tanur right here. Okay. So see right here, this is what a tanur looks like. They probably would have made there. Okay. So I'll turn it around so you guys can see too. See the little picture of the tanur, the oven made out of clay?
Yeah.
So that would have been like the oven there. A modern day tanur. This is one you've seen, Carrie. See, the modern day tanur is made with bricks.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a modern day tanur. Okay. And so this would have been, oops, sorry, I'm getting some feedback. Let me make sure. There we go. And so this tanur and a burning lamp, which is an esh lapid, pass through the pieces. And there's been lots of commentary on what those two represent. And we do know that in ancient treaties and covenants, that when they would make a covenant or an ancient treaty, that the parties would walk through these, the pieces. Okay. And so, we talked about before, I think it was in the Genesis 1, in the Bereshit one, what we thought that esh lapid link was, because I even talked about how in Daniel chapter 10 and verse 5, it says, when I looked up, and there before me was a man dressed in linen, wearing a belt made of fine Uphaz gold. His body was like beryl, and his face looked like lightning, and his eyes were like fiery torches, the esh lapid. And his arms and feet were the color of burnished bronze, and when he spoke, it sounded like a roar of a crowd. And so here we've got this messenger in Daniel 10, is his eyes are like an esh lapid. So this messenger is referenced in the same terms that we see that when this covenant is cut with Abraham, it's that same term. And we also see, that being a picture of Yeshua being the esh lapid, walking among the pieces. So now, immediately after cutting this covenant, we see the proposition of Hagar. Because in Genesis 16:1, we see that now Sarah, Abram's wife, had not borne him a child, but she had an Egyptian slave girl named Hagar. So Sarah said to Abram, "Here now, Yah has kept me from having children. So go in and sleep with my slave girl. Maybe I'll be able to have children through her." And Abram listened to what Sarah said. And it was after Abram had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan that Abram's wife took Hagar, the Egyptian, her slave girl, and gave her to Abram, her husband, to be his wife. And Abram had sexual relations with Hagar, and she conceived. But when she became aware that she was pregnant, she looked upon her mistress with contempt. And Sarai said to Abram, "This outrage being done to me is your fault. True, I gave my slave girl to you to keep for you to sleep with. But when you saw that she was pregnant, when she was pregnant, she began holding me in contempt. May Yah decide who is right, I or you." However, Abram answered Sarai, "Look, she's your slave girl. Deal with her as you think fit." And then Sarai treated her harshly so that she ran away from her. Okay, so why would this be brought up immediately following cutting the covenant? You know, and it starts off with like,
Well, he got that covenant thing was what? He was, how old was he at the time of the cutting the covenant? Abraham was, I don't see that.
Mm-mm.
Hmm.
And when you look at it, wait a minute. So
The promise was given 10 years ago, right?
before, yeah, when you go back before, because he actually, we've got about 13 years there.
Okay.
Okay, so when you look at
I don't understand Sarah's decision.
why she would do that, okay, it looks like, and then too, Sarah's saying, Yah's kept me from having children here, so you go in and marry my slave girl. It's like, okay, why would she do that? And it seems like,
Abraham didn't have any trouble listening to her.
he didn't have any trouble listening to her. But, some people will look at it, well, okay, she's doubtful, or, she's blaming Yah that she can't have kids or that she's barren here. But I think in a way, looking at the concept of those times and what it was, I think she recognizes the fact that Yah's in control and he determines who's going to have children and who's not. And in the ancient Near East, the failure to produce an heir was a major problem. That is why you divorced your wife. If she could not produce an heir, you could divorce her. Well, look at how long Abram and Sarah had been married. We don't know exactly when they got married, but we know how old they were. When he left, he was 75 and she was 65.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure exactly when Haran died, but it had to have been long enough to where she didn't have a spouse and that she had to be married off. Okay. And they usually married young. So she's, looking at it. Okay, well, he could have divorced her and been fine with it, but we don't see that. And then so failure to produce a child was a major problem. And we, even in the Code of Hammurabi and in the Newsy text, there, it says here that, and I put this in there, that legal documents allowed a man whose wife failed to provide him with a son to impregnate a slave girl. That's in the Code of Hammurabi. Also in the Newsy text too, it also says that, he could marry or impregnate one of the slave girls. Okay. So that way that would be his heir. In Lapit Ishtar Code, it even says that you could do it with a prostitute, and as long as if you had an heir. Okay. The child from that relationship could then be acknowledged by the father as heirs according to the Code of Hammurabi. And that, these are notes too from the IVP commentary. And Abraham and Sarah basically were employing the same strategy when they used this, slave girl Hagar as like a legal surrogate to produce an heir for them. Because, and I think in a way that's why it's brought up after the fact of the covenant, because it's reinforcing that you're going to have this child. And, she's like, I'm well past, my prime. So here.
It's if Hagar was given to Abram to have a child with, why was, and it was Sarah's idea, why did Sarah not, was she not supposed to bring that child into her fold, into her bosom? And Hagar was just there still as the maid?
Wasn't, it wasn't like it was her child. Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't her child, but shouldn't she have, since she was given that option to shouldn't she have embraced it?
She could have, but remember, this is just her being pregnant yet. We don't see what happens after that. Okay. Because we'll get, like Eddie mentioned earlier, or was it Ken mentioned, was it you, Eddie, that mentioned about him mistreating?
Ken
It's mentioned about him mistreating Isaac.
Yeah.
And then when you look at that word, it's actually mitzahek, which is he's playing with him as you would in a relationship with a wife.
like a homosexual.
Yeah, like a homosexual relationship. And then that's when Sarah said, you out of here. Okay. So yeah, that's the different. But anyway, so here we just have Hagar pregnant. And, so basically, Sarah's looking at, this is a strategy for us. It's something that it's in our culture. This is how we do it. This is nothing new to her. And I mentioned earlier, remember how Hagar is treating Sarah. That word contempt is the same word kalal that's used in Genesis 12, 1-3, where I will curse those who curse you. So what was Hagar doing? She was belittling Sarah. Okay. And because Sarah and Abraham were married, they were one. Remember, she is to be cursed then, but because Hagar is carrying the seed of Abraham, she wasn't cursed. And, we see, of course, that the blessing is extended to Ishmael, because he is still Abraham's seed. And that doesn't mean that Ishmael was cast away, but he was blessed also. In Genesis 17:20, it says that, but as for Ishmael, I've heard you. I have blessed him. I will make him fruitful, and I will give him many descendants. He will father 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. So just like Abram's through Isaac was going to be blessed, we see Ishmael's line is also blessed. And that goes back to what you were talking about too, Terry, with, the nations that have all the oil, that's how they were blessed. So.
But there's a but in the covenant.
Yeah, the covenant. And, when we look at, here's something I thought about is, when we look at Avram and we think about him being the father of our faith, and that he's an example, his life is an example to his. One thing that I find interesting is that he was called to come out of Babylon at 75. But it was 24 years later before he was circumcised. Because in Genesis 17, verse 1, when Avram was 99 years old, Yah appeared to Avram and said to him, I am El Shaddai. Walk in my presence and be pure-hearted, and I will make my covenant between me and you, and I will increase in your numbers greatly. And Avram fell on his face, and Elohim continued speaking with him. As for me, this is my covenant with you. You will be the father of many nations. Your name will no longer be Avram, but your name would be called Avraham. Because I made you the father of many nations, I will cause you to be very fruitful. I will make many nations of you. Your kings will descend from you. I'm establishing my covenant between me and you, along with all your descendants after you, generation after generation, as an everlasting covenant after you, the land in which you are now foreigners, all the land of the Canaan, as a permanent possession, and I will be their Elohim. And Yah says to Avram, as for you, you are to keep my covenant, which you are to keep between, you're to keep my covenant, you and your descendants after you, generation after generation. Here is my covenant, which you are to keep between me and you, along with all your descendants after you. Every male among you is to be circumcised. You are to be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskin. This is to be the sign of the covenant between you and me. So when he was 99, he was circumcised. And remember back in Genesis 12, he was 75 when Yah called him, and now he's 99. So that's 24 years that, you look at it. And two, it makes me wonder, why is it that we don't see the covenant of the pieces happening when he calls Avram? Was Avram not a part of the covenant for those 24 years?
Why wouldn't they circumcise then?
Or is it, I thought about this too, or is it like a parallel to what we see in Acts chapter 15? You remember when the Jerusalem council is called there, and it talks about the new believers coming in. And it says that, what do? You don't, because the whole question came up about them being circumcised. He says, you don't lay but these 4 things on them. And then the rest they're going to get every Shabbat and every, week going into the synagogue. They're going to be hearing this. And as they're coming through it, then they'll get to that point.
Like that decision.
Right, to walk, to be a part of that covenant. Yeah. And so I wondered if that parallels what's happening here with Avram, is that when he was called out, yes, in faith he believed, but it was a process. Like we were talking about, he still had to walk it out. Just like, I said at the beginning, when you look at that word lech, that the picture of the lamed and the kaf is learning to bend. It's learning to submit to his will, that it was a process, that it wasn't something that happened overnight. And then a lot of times we, want to exalt Abraham as being a man of faith, but I think it was that process going through to where, he was continuously moving forward and not backward.
And this is one of the things that has concerned me about coming into the revelation of Torah and all of that, is that a lot of people, once they get a new recruit, let's say, when they come in, the first thing they want to do to them is tell them all the things that they are doing as part of Torah. Like, I've given up Christmas, I've done this, I've done that. And laying it on them like, this is what you should do because I'm doing it. But it's the same thing. You've got to allow that person to come in. You've got to allow him to pursue his walk or her walk, and allow her to make those decisions based on what Yah is telling her, not what you're telling her or you're putting on her or him. And allow the Spirit of God to bring that person into the Torah and to the revelation of what they need to walk in.
Right. And we're all at different points. I mean, it's like,
and you don't be able to accept them at those points.
Right.
You don't have to judge them for what I've known some that have come in, and yet they still did both processes of holidays. And I don't judge them for that.
Yeah. And how many of us did? You think back, we were talking about, it's been since 1999, which that 1 year, because that was the last year we had a Christmas tree, which Eddie put up, because in 98 I was like, I'm not putting up one. But it was
Same thing.
You think about it. I mean, how long did you do that? And I mean,
Oh my.
yeah. And you think about before we came out of the church, how long did we do both Shabbat and Sunday, which was hard. We did it for like 3 years.
Yeah.
and it was like, it was hard,
Yeah.
You know,
gave up
'cause-
the whole weekend.
because
for
that was it.
That was horrible.
Yeah, that was harder for you.
That was
But I mean, that was something to think about. And you're right.
But what I find is that I'm acceptable to that, but I found that Christians weren't acceptable to that.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
If
that's
you didn't
bad.
do their traditions,
They're big.
Yeah.
they would be very challenging to be around
Very
during
judgmental.
Right.
those times of the year.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And mostly we're talking about Christmas,
Yeah.
okay, or Easter.
Right.
Okay?
And that's the
Or
thing.
eating.
It's very,
Eating, yes.
they have, a lot of times it's, we're judged because we're not doing those very harshly.
Yeah. I have friends that
So,
judge me,
yeah.
that tell me that I'm wrong,
Yeah.
that I shouldn't be doing that.
Right.
That you should be embracing all the Christianity stuff, and that you're not.
Well, was it Paul or Peter who said that about don't let them judge you in the things of the
Oh, my
celebrating the
goodness,
holidays?
the Christians think that's what they're
Yeah.
talking about them about
Right.
the things
Yeah,
that they do,
it's actually the opposite.
but it's
Yeah,
actually the
yeah,
opposite.
right.
Yes,
Yeah.
because we know that Paul was a Torah observant Jewish.
Right. And to think about, that's why I think it's with Abraham and his life, it is a progression, and it
Yeah.
is something that we have
all
to
of us.
die daily
Right.
to, and to bend down. And when I look back at the numerical value and the meaning of that word, lechlecha, that it is, it's that you've got to make it a continuous process,
Yeah.
and it's not something you can just do overnight. And, a lot of us, I mean, I'm guilty of it. When we first come into, the Hebraic roots or whatever, we tend to get judgmental. We get very judgmental of those that are doing those things. But then, like you said, it's, it takes a while sometimes, and then you get to where, okay, the pendulum is not swinging to the extremes, and we're here, and you recognize we were all there. We were all there. We were at that place of where we were doing those things, and we have to remember there was grace given to us during those times too, and that we need to extend that same grace to others.
I mean, I love the fact that Christianity, that people during the Christmas season seem to be very happy, and they're focused on more things than themselves, and they seem to be celebrating a joyous time. But
And some opposite too.
and there's some
Sometimes they feel like the worst.
they're overwhelmed because
the
they
worst time's
got
Christmas.
to go in so much
Debt,
debt and
yeah.
everything else, and they're
And people-
comparing. They got to decorate as much as their neighbors are, and all of these kind of things. But we just have to learn to love one another.
Yeah. And it was very hard. I mean, even being in the schools, because, at the school I taught at, we were in a very affluent neighborhood.
Yeah.
So, but that was the neighborhood kids that were zoned for us. But we also had in our zone the projects,
Mhm.
and the majority of our kids, came from
They didn't
there.
know what-
And so it was very difficult during the holidays. And so you had to learn very quickly. You don't ask, what did you do over the holiday or anything like that? Because some of the kids were going off to Spain and France, or going to Jamaica or wherever. And then you had the other little kid who did nothing but sit at home by himself, because parents had to work, or with the older sibling, and just in front of the TV. And that was it.
Yeah.
We had, kids who lived in, hotels,
Yeah.
and, we have our bus route, the kids picked up at the hotel.
Yeah.
And so it is difficult, and that's where you need to extend the grace. And a lot of people don't do that. And
Yes.
so we have to remember that, especially
On both sides.
for both sides. Yeah. And but, with Abraham,
So I remember probably in 2000 or 2001, me and Sandra, we was met with Jeff Weiss,
yep.
and he had Michael Rood, and
Is Jeff still in in North Carolina, or is he? No.
yeah, he's in Kings Mountain.
Okay.
So as far as I know, but when we met with Jeff Weiss and Michael Rood was there, and Sandra was having a hard time dealing with this, but after she listened to Michael Rood, she said, "Oh, I'm all in." I mean, cause she presented it. I mean, he presented it in a way that she understood,
Right.
and and
But he,
and Michael Rood, you know how he is. I mean, he's
Right.
like, and
like that.
and anyway, so we decided to quit doing Christmas and all that kind of stuff, and we started doing the Sabbath.
Mhm.
And then the next year, we went down to Hilton Head. We met with Jeff Weiss.
They
Uh,
met every Saturday.
we went in the Atlantic Ocean. We got mikvah.
Mhm.
we did,
It's a-
we did a mikvah.
That's okay.
And, we did a mikvah in the ocean.
Left your chains in the ocean.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know if you heard that. Terry said you left your chains in the ocean. So
Beautiful,
So
beautiful, Kenny.
I so relieved.
mhm.
That is beautiful.
Yep, that is beautiful. And to think about, we would not be at the place we are today if we did not have the grace of others that were farther in their walk. So,
Right.
Definitely.
and that's something that we need to, remember
That's
to,
inspiration.
that they gave us grace too, and that, it's a process. And that's why you don't, with the new people coming in, I think that's why you don't push all of that on them, that as they're hearing every week, then they're going to get more and more. And then they have to
They're gonna
choose
be
to be,
like the palm.
yeah, they're
They're
going to
gonna
bend like the palms. Yep.
and they're gonna submit to y'all's purposes and plans.
Yep.
And for their
I
life.
know. I know when I walked out, me and Sandra walked out in the ocean with Jeff Weiss to get mikvah, and I asked him. I said, "Will you say the priestly?"
Mhm.
It's like me.
Yeah.
Blessing
Yeah,
of this, and
It's like me. It's hard to get it out.
Very emotional.
Yeah.
Hard to
Yes,
get it
yeah.
out.
That's beautiful that pierces his heart.
And he was able to do that and
he
bless
was.
just,
He did, and I'm sorry, I'm so emotional.
you're
That's
okay.
beautiful, Kenny.
Yeah. So that's, yeah. And it's a touching thing to think about that we are.
Well, in your
Grappling.
life, you're what the Bible calls, you're doing a change from the man or woman you was
Yeah.
to one that is clean before God now and is acceptable to Him for grace.
Yeah.
You
And
know?
It's been a interesting walk, and
Mhm.
I've learned more and more since and I don't mean that to be condescending by saying this, but since I came out of the church and totally gave up the paganism that had infiltrated the church and that they encouraged.
right.
Oh, and I don't mean to be judgmental, but they'll just have to see it for themselves. Yeah. And I pray that Yah will open their eyes and give them a hunger
Yeah.
to want to know exactly their Hebraic roots
Yeah.
and
And
realize. Mhm.
we
Go
have
ahead.
to be the ones that are, being that light. We have to be the ones that are walking
Right.
the way to show them that, and if, I think that comes back to where it's so important not to compromise on things, because when we do that, it is basically hurting your witness with others, it's,
Right.
and I think,
Yeah.
just like with, when this, even with Abraham and Lot, that Abraham, could have chosen the land that he wanted to. He was the more powerful, but for the sake of peace, to him, he's like, well, let Lot choose, y'all's going to take care of me. I'm going to, and for the sake of peace, it wasn't something that was a sin or whatever, but it was like, okay, I'm going to give him that choice and he's going to be able to make that choice. So, and he did it to keep the peace with his family. So, and I think sometimes, we tend to do that, but then where's the line of compromise and keeping the peace?
Right.
And that's what we have to determine. So,
Amen.
anything else y'all want to share? Or?
Yeah, I got one thing.
Go ahead.
We are in a warfare November the 4th.
Mm-hmm.
This is the time to vote.
Yeah, voting.
And one of the things specifically, we are losing one. We are hopefully not losing one of our greatest cities, even though she is Babylon, New York City, to the influence of the Muslim Islamic
on John.
we really have a fight on our hands, and we really need to go into battle in the Lord that we can.
Amen.
Islam will not get their way.
Yeah.
I mean, because we've already lost several cities in the north.
Right.
And we need to really mount up with as many brothers and sisters as we can to pray.
Yeah.
Pray that
it takes action. It's not, and that's what I said at the beginning too. It wasn't just about potential. Abraham had to act.
Yes.
So it is, just saying.
I don't mean going to New York with you.
No, but I'm saying, as far as going out and vote.
Right.
And
this is what you don't know. You don't know because back in the day, God allowed Nebuchadnezzar, and he allowed a lot of these evil men to do what God wanted done.
To bring down
everything so the final outcome would be something better.
Mm-hmm.
And is this one of those where God's going to allow this guy so it will show the rest of the country, hey, we can't do this. We've got to come toward God. I don't know the answer on that.
Well, I don't know the answer.
I don't know which way. And just like I said, but we still need to pray against anything like that. But I guess at the end of the day,
he couldn't come to be mayor and then come with the revelation of knowing Yah. We don't know.
Right. Yeah.
Or come that the other people would turn their stomach so much and show, I don't want to be that way.
Yeah.
That state, that city.
Yeah.
So we don't know. I mean,
and like we were talking earlier about the blessings upon the descendants, like I mentioned, a lot of people say, oh, well, the Jews are controlling everything because they have this money.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But, that's part of the blessing of Abraham. That was part of the blessing, and even going through Jacob's. But when you think about the businesses, if that does happen in New York City, you have a lot of these big companies are there that are Jewish-led companies. What's going to happen? Are they going to pull out?
Several of them are already pulling out and renting places in
Florida. Yeah.
In the larger scheme of things, who's the richest people in the world? It's Saudi Arabia.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's the Arabs.
Yeah.
They're the richest people.
Yeah.
So, and God himself said in the word, I will give them the wisdom to make money.
Mm-hmm.
That the word says that.
Yeah.
I didn't say it. Word says it. So
well, yeah, we'll just definitely keep that in prayer, and especially like you said, get out, November the 4th and vote, because that is important to exercise your rights.
As a
citizen, yeah.
Yeah, if everybody wants to get ready for the blessing over the congregation.
Thank you.
I just want to say Shabbat Shalom real quick, and just
Shabbat
catching
Shalom.
the end of this and hearing everybody's share has blessed me so much. So I just want to say I love you all, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. I'm glad you could get on for the end.
Amen. Amen. Yevirekaka Yahavavirish Mereha Yahir Yahava Penava, Ileka Vehuneka, Yesayahava Pinavileka, Vayashim Leka, Shalom. May Yah bless you and keep you. May Yah make his face to shine on you and show you his favor. May Yah lift up his face towards you and give you peace. B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach, Sar Shalom. Go in peace. Amen.
Amen.
Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat. Shabbat, Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shalom. Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shalom. You know, one thing I asked Lisa yesterday,
Oh, God.
I said, what do you think about me turning my hat around? And she asked me, why are you doing that? I says, well, I look cool. And I didn't know if y'all agreed with that or not. Now this teasing me. This one
Looks better.
Yeah, set apart looks better than that. Because that's can be a witness. But anyhow, listen, this has been a great teaching, and I appreciate.
I like your hat any way you wear it.
Thank you. I appreciate you so much, and we love y'all. And this is what y'all meant for us to come together.
Yes.
And to be in unity and love each other. We don't have to agree on every, cross of the T and dot of the I, like I've said, but we do have to love each other.
Oh, yeah.
Because y'all
Amen.
said we did. If we don't love each other, that one that we see, but say we love the one that we don't see, he said we're lying. So the thing about it, I love every one of you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. You have a blessed and great week. And until next week, we'll see you. And I'll have my hat on right.
Shabbat Shalom.